in exactly 5 years. I mean, by the time we hit 2029, the AI bubble is going to burst.
Yeah, I know how that sounds. It sounds terrifying, right? Like a warning to liquidate your tech portfolio and just run for the hills.
Right, exactly. But here's the catch for you listening today. This crash in 2029, it is actually the exact moment this technology stops being this shiny novelty for Silicon Valley.
Exactly. It becomes the invisible infrastructure running everyone's daily lives.
Mhm.
Because if you look at the historical data on market corrections, it consistently shows us this exact pattern.
We tend to view a bubble bursting as this systemic failure, right? Like a sign that the whole technology was a fraud.
Right, but if you look at the massive infrastructure booms of the past century, a huge market correction is usually the signal that a technology is finally maturing. The hype dies,
Yeah.
but the actual utility skyrockets.
Okay, let's unpack this timeline because getting to the bottom of that paradox is basically our mission for this deep dive today.
Yeah, and we have an incredibly comprehensive set of notes and interviews to get through.
We really do. We're pulling from the work of Weng-Yu Kwan, who is this investor and researcher with a totally fascinating background. He operates right at the intersection of evolutionary biology, historical research, and technology.
And our goal here today is to cut entirely through the standard tech jargon. We're absolutely not going to sit here debating benchmark scores or, the parameter counts of different language models.
Oh, thank God. That kind of analysis is obsolete the moment it gets published anyway.
It really is. To understand the future of AI, we actually have to correct some massive misconceptions about our past. The more durable framework requires looking at AI through the lens of human evolution, the Industrial Revolution, and a pretty chilling concept called digital feudalism.
So we have this bold claim about 2029. But to understand where we're going, we first have to accurately diagnose where we are sitting right now, right? Like in this cycle of AI panic versus AI mania.
Right, and our current position is best described as a psychological valley.
Of
Yeah, but not a valley of technological capability. I mean, the models are obviously advancing at a breakneck pace. It's a valley of public perception.
Okay. So the capabilities of the models are accelerating, but the average person's feelings about those capabilities are either just stagnant or actively hostile.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it is within this specific dip in public sentiment that the seeds for the coming mania are actually being planted. Consider where the power resides in this exact moment.
It's all centralized, right?
Completely centralized. The massive computational clusters, the bleeding-edge foundation models, the enterprise apps, they are locked inside the servers of a handful of tech conglomerates.
Right. So because of that centralization, the average person isn't directly wielding this tech to improve their own economic standing. They are basically just watching it perform tasks from a distance.
Yeah, they see a video online of a generative model writing a flawless legal brief in 4 seconds, or producing broadcast quality video from a text prompt.
And if you're a paralegal or a video editor, your immediate, totally rational response is just intense fear. You look at that screen and think, well, my livelihood is evaporating.
That fear is a perfectly natural human response to early-stage automation. We saw the exact same psychological reaction during the dawn of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, with the mechanical looms, right.
Yes. When mechanical looms began appearing, master weavers didn't see an opportunity for cheaper textiles. They saw the apocalypse of their specific hard-earned craft.
Because people derive their identity and their economic security from their specialized skills. When a machine mimics that skill, panic naturally ensues.
Exactly. But the underlying dynamic driving this current fear is that the public is only perceiving the threat of the technology, without yet receiving the direct personal benefit.
Which brings us to the turning point. The timeline projects that around 2028 or 2029, a massive psychological shift is going to occur.
Right, the everyday person is going to stop viewing AI as an existential threat to their job and start realizing it's an infinitely scalable tool for their own advancement.
But wait, if everyone suddenly wakes up and realizes this tech is going to elevate their quality of life, why does that trigger a market crash? Shouldn't a universal embrace of the tech send the market into the stratosphere?
You would think so, but this raises an important question about how human beings process expectation versus reality. When the public finally grasps the tangible benefits, their expectations will basically detach from physical constraints.
I see. So the psychology flips instantly from deep panic to absolute unbridled mania.
Yes, people will assume that because the software is incredibly smart, the societal revolution will just happen overnight.
Like we go from this is going to destroy society tomorrow to this is going to cure every disease and automate every mundane task by next Tuesday.
Exactly that. And the Dutch tulip mania of the 1630s provides a brilliant structural parallel here.
Oh, I love this analogy from the research.
Right. The popular shorthand for tulip mania is that a bunch of fools bought something entirely worthless. But the historical reality is far more nuanced than that. The underlying value of the tulips was completely real.
They were a durable luxury good.
Yes, they were. And the expectation of a booming trade market was also real, driven by expanding global wealth. The fatal flaw was simply the timeline of human greed.
Because growing a tulip actually takes years. You know, you have to cultivate the bulb, plant it, wait for it to mature.
Right.
But trading the concept of the tulip like the paper contract, saying you own a bulb that will bloom next spring that can happen 100 times a day.
Exactly. The speed of financial speculation infinitely outpaced the biological reality of agriculture. And we are setting up the exact same mismatch today with AI.
So the financial markets will project the value of a fully automated, AI-driven society.
Right. But the physical reality of building out that society requires laying millions of miles of fiber optic cable, overhauling global power grids, building custom silicon, and redesigning physical supply chains.
Wow. So when the financial expectation completely outpaces the speed of physical infrastructure deployment, the gap between the two just becomes unsustainable.
It does. It absolutely snaps.
It's like tracking a package online. You know, you order something rare and expensive from across the world. And for 3 days, it's crossing the ocean, clearing customs, moving through massive logistics hubs.
And you don't even check the status during all that.
Exactly. But the moment you get that notification on your phone that says, out for delivery, your psychology just breaks. Suddenly you are pacing by the front door, glaring out the window every 10 minutes.
You get absolutely furious that the truck is taking another 2 hours to navigate your neighborhood.
Right. You completely ignore the miracle of global supply chains because your expectation hyper-accelerated the moment you knew it was close.
That is a perfect analogy. The out for delivery notification for a fully integrated AI economy is going to arrive around 2028.
So the public will see the delivery truck turning onto their street, they'll assume the package is already in their hands, and they will pour capital into the market accordingly.
Yes. And when they realize the truck still has to navigate the complex traffic of regulatory hurdles, hardware bottlenecks, and corporate warfare, the delay shatters the illusion. The bubble bursts.
And looking at the global landscape of who is actually driving that delivery truck, the research neutrally points out the U.S. is currently positioned to lead this wave, largely due to its historical infrastructure choices.
But it also highlights that China has a completely different set of structural advantages, which pulls us away from the question when the shift happens and forces us to look at what specific data is actually fueling it.
Because the data is the lifeblood of this entire transition, and to understand why different regions are approaching AI differently today, we have to look back at the divergence in network infrastructure over the last 20 years, right?
Right. The United States historically invested heavily in fixed network infrastructure, the PC-based internet.
Desktops, Ethernet cables, fiber to the home, the whole era of sitting at a desk to go online.
Exactly. And when a population primarily accesses the internet while stationary at a desk, typing on a keyboard, the byproduct of that activity is content.
Articles, blog posts, digitized books, forums, image boards.
Yes. The fixed internet is an engine for accumulating massive, unfathomable mountains of static content. And that multi-decade accumulation leads in a direct, unbroken line to the dominant AI paradigm we see today.
Which is AIGC, or AI-generated content. That makes perfect sense. Large language models are essentially the ultimate distillation of all that fixed network content.
Right. You feed a system 20 years of digitized text, and it learns how to generate text.
But the alternative path is where this gets wildly interesting. The research points out that other regions, particularly China, bypassed the fixed network era almost entirely and leapfrogged straight into mobile and wireless networks.
What's fascinating here is how fundamentally the global tech industry misunderstood the smartphone in its early days.
They really did.
The prevailing Western view of the mobile internet was incredibly reductive. It was treated simply as, the internet, but portable.
Think back to the original iPhone launch in 2007. It's this iconic piece of business history. Steve Jobs is on stage, and he famously tells the audience he is introducing 3 revolutionary products.
Right. He says he's launching a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device.
It was a masterclass in product marketing, but he missed the monumental underlying paradigm shift of the hardware he was holding.
He did. The true historical contribution of the smartphone was not digitizing content, and it wasn't putting a web browser in your pocket. The smartphone digitized human behavior.
Digitizing behavior versus digitizing content. That distinction feels a bit abstract. How does that actually play out in the data?
Let's look at a specific example involving telecom data from the research because it perfectly illustrates the shift from static action to continuous behavior.
Okay, let's hear it.
Years ago, while consulting for major telecom providers, our researcher tried to explain the untapped value of something called off-site power on-off data.
I read that section, and it completely changed how I think about my phone. What exactly is off-site power on?
Think about the physical act of turning your device completely off. Not just locking the screen, but powering it down entirely.
In the modern era, you almost never do that.
Exactly. The only consistent scenario where a user powers down a device in one location, travels, and powers it back up in a completely different location hours later is when they board a commercial flight.
So the telecom network pings the phone turning off in Chicago, and 3 hours later, it pings the phone turning on in Miami.
Right. The initial telecom assumption was simply that they had updated the user's location. But the strategic insight was that they didn't just have location data, they had captured behavioral intent.
They knew with near absolute certainty that this specific user had just taken a flight.
Yes. And if you aggregate that data across millions of users continuously, you are no longer just operating a communications network. You are operating a real-time tracking system for the physical movement and commercial intent of entire populations.
So they knew you flew, which means they could theoretically predict that you're going to need a hotel reservation, a rental car, or a restaurant recommendation in Miami.
Exactly. The research mentions that if the telecom giants had ever fully realized the predictive power of this behavioral data, they could have easily wiped out dedicated travel websites.
But the telecoms just sat on the data. They treated it as exhaust rather than fuel.
Sociology and economics used to be constrained by a fundamental uncertainty principle. It was physically impossible to continuously track the sequential real-time choices of massive crowds.
You could run a survey or track point-of-sale receipts, but those are just static snapshots.
Right. The mobile phone introduced continuous telemetry. An action is a one-time event like clicking a link. Behavior is sequential.
Clipping a link, scrolling for 10 seconds, checking a bank balance, then booking a flight.
Exactly. Behavior allows for prediction. And anticipating human needs before they are explicitly stated is the most valuable commercial frontier in existence.
So connecting this back to the AI models. If 20 years of aggregating content gave us models that can write essays and generate images, then 20 years of aggregating continuous human behavior gives us something entirely different.
It gives us large action models, LAMs. This is the evolution from generative AI to behavioral AI.
Okay, give us an example.
Well, a language model can give you a recipe if you tell it you are hungry. An action model observes that it is 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, cross-references your commuting pattern, notes that your smart fridge is empty, predicts you will want dinner, and autonomously orders your favorite meal to arrive exactly when you walk through the door.
Wow. It shifts from advising you on an action to executing the action on your behalf. The commercial implications of that are staggering.
They are. Paying a consultant for advice is a tiny market compared to paying a proxy to actually execute the labor. But if AI is shifting from generating text to executing behavior, it forces a complete rewiring of how businesses actually operate.
Right. And to understand the structural mechanics of that rewiring, we have to revisit the Industrial Revolution. We have to correct a massive historical blind spot regarding how foundational technologies actually distribute power.
If you ask anyone who sparked the Industrial Revolution, the default answer is always James Watt,
Yeah.
the guy who perfected the steam engine.
Right. We treat the invention of the machine as the catalyst.
But the steam engine was just one part. James Watt is vastly overcredited when it comes to the actual architectural shift of industry. The true pioneer of the industrial age was Richard Arkwright.
Arkwright. He's the one who invented the water frame, the mechanical spinning machine.
Yes. But more importantly, he built the first functional factory. Arkwright understood that the innovation wasn't just replacing human muscle with a machine. The true breakthrough was the concept of continuous power applied to a centralized workflow.
He grouped the machines together and linked them to a single, relentless power source, which was initially a water wheel.
Right, but water power has a massive geographic limitation. You have to build your entire factory on the banks of a fast-moving river.
You are totally tethered to the geography, and if the river freezes or dries up, your entire production line halts.
Exactly. That limitation is what made the transition to steam so revolutionary. Steam engines decoupled production from geography. You could build a factory anywhere.
But the early integration of steam power was incredibly localized and inefficient, wasn't it?
Very much so. The steam engine generated power at a single massive point. If you have a sprawling assembly line with hundreds of distinct workstations, you cannot physically attach a tiny steam boiler to every single worker's bench.
That brings up the Henry Ford example from the research, which completely blew my mind. I had never considered the transitional architecture of his early factories.
The visual is just staggering. In Ford's early assembly plants, he installed steam engines that were 2 or 3 stories tall. They were industrial behemoths.
But they were not directly turning the belts and gears of the automotive assembly line, right?
No, he was using those massive steam engines strictly to generate electricity.
He was running a private power plant inside a car factory.
Exactly. And within a decade, the sheer inefficiency of that model became obvious. Ford realized his core competency was manufacturing automobiles, not managing steam boilers.
The breakthrough wasn't the steam itself, it was the realization that he could just plug his factory into an external electrical grid.
Let a specialized utility company handle the complex thermodynamics of power generation and use the seamless, universally distributable nature of electricity to power every individual tool on the line.
The parallels to the current AI landscape are almost perfect. If we map this directly, the massive large language models, the multi-billion-dollar clusters run by OpenAI, Google, or Anthropic, they are the external electrical grid.
Yes. They are the specialized utility companies generating the raw cognitive power. The foundational models are the power plants.
But what is actually drawing the current?
Well, in Ford's factory, the electricity-powered specialized machines. In the digital economy, the cognitive electricity from the large models powers individual AI agents.
So AI agents are the machines on the new assembly line.
Precisely. Consider the workflow of video production today. It is entirely human-powered and sequential. A strategist researches a trending topic.
Then they pass their notes to a copywriter who drafts the script.
Right, and the script goes to an animator or videographer who generates the visual assets. An editor stitches it together, and a quality control person ensures the branding is consistent.
It's basically a bucket brigade of human cognitive labor.
It is, but the agent-driven workflow completely removes the human from the sequential handoffs. You don't have one massive AI trying to do all of it simultaneously that's highly inefficient and prone to hallucination.
Instead, you have a digital assembly line of specialized agents.
Exactly. One agent is fine-tuned exclusively for trend research. It scours the internet, compiles the data, and hands it off to a specialized scripting agent.
Then the script is automatically routed to a video generation agent. And finally, a continuity agent reviews the output against brand guidelines.
Right, and every single one of these agents is drawing raw reasoning power from the centralized LLM grid, but they are applying it to highly specialized tasks.
I want to push back on what this means for corporate culture, because the implications here fundamentally dismantle modern hustle culture. We have entire industries built on the glorification of grinding employees, pulling all-nighters, working 80-hour weeks.
Wearing their exhaustion as a badge of honor.
Exactly. But if your competitor is using an agentic assembly line, human hustle becomes a massive liability, doesn't it?
It does. The best, most lethal business model of the 2030s will not rely on a sleep-deprived human drinking caffeine at 3 in the morning to finish a pitch deck.
Right.
The optimal structure is an incredibly diligent, tireless network of specialized AI agents iterating on a problem continuously.
The agents are working the assembly line while the human literally goes to sleep?
Exactly. The human's role shifts from laborer to factory manager. You design the agentic workflow, you define the desired output, you ensure the connection to the cognitive power grid is stable, and then you step away.
You only intervene if the system flags an anomaly.
Right. We don't expect the manager of a modern auto plant to pick up a wrench and manually attach a bumper. We shouldn't expect the manager of a digital workflow to manually draft the emails.
But wait, if massive, centralized AI models are the new electricity grid powering these agents, that immediately introduces a massive security and control flaw. Whoever owns the power plant can dictate terms to everyone using the electricity.
Yes, and that brings us to the concept of digital feudalism, which might be the most urgent societal critique in this entire body of research.
Digital feudalism. It sounds like a sci-fi dystopia.
It's not a hypothetical dystopian future, though. It is the exact architecture of the modern internet. Look at the dominant tech platforms.
The research highlights Chinese super apps like Alibaba, Tencent, and Meituan, right?
Yes, but the underlying mechanics are identical to Apple, Google, Meta, and Amazon. These entities do not operate as open, interoperable markets. They function as walled empires.
Walled empires, meaning they are designed entirely around user captivity. Once you open their application, every feature is engineered to prevent you from ever leaving.
Exactly. They refuse to share user data across platforms. They force transactions through proprietary payment gateways that extract massive tolls.
They trap the user inside a closed ecosystem, essentially rendering the user a digital serf. All of the behavioral data you generate while navigating inside those walls enriches the lord of the platform, not you.
Right. And the really insidious part is the illusion of service. These platforms, these supply-side applications, present themselves as your digital concierge.
They say, we curated these news articles just for you, or here's the absolute best price for your vacation.
But their fiduciary duty, their legal obligation, is to maximize profit for their shareholders, not to optimize outcomes for the user. There is an inherent structural antagonism built into supply-side apps.
They have absolute data supremacy over the isolated user. And the most glaring example of how this asymmetry is weaponized is the practice of differential pricing, or algorithmic price discrimination.
Yes.
Walk us through exactly how differential pricing works, because when you realize the mechanics of it, it is absolutely infuriating.
Imagine two users open the same travel application at the exact same moment to book the exact same hotel room.
Okay.
The platform's algorithm accesses a vast trove of historical data on both users. It knows their income brackets, the retail value of the smartphones they're using, their past travel expenditures, and their typical browsing patience.
It knows user A is wealthy, uses the newest flagship phone, and usually books the first option they see.
Right. And it knows user B is on a strict budget, uses an older device, and typically spends an hour comparing prices. Based on that behavioral profile, the algorithm dynamically alters the price.
So user A is shown a rate of $400 a night. User B is shown a rate of $250 a night for the exact same room.
Yes, exactly. The platform extracts a $150 premium from user A simply because the algorithm predicted they wouldn't bother to check a competitor. The platform extracts maximum capital entirely through information asymmetry.
And the only reason there isn't a massive public revolt over this is because we are completely isolated from each other. I only see my screen. I have no idea what price you are seeing on your screen, so I assume the marketplace is objective.
It is a brilliantly hostile system. But this is exactly where AI transitions from a corporate tool into a consumer battering ram. Artificial intelligence is the force that will shatter the walled gardens.
But it fundamentally depends on where the AI is integrated, right? If you just download another AI app from an app store, you are still playing by the platform's rules.
Exactly. Integration at the OS level changes the entire balance of power. The AI has to sit at the operating system level. It has to be baked into the phone's hardware and core software.
We are already seeing the leading edge of this with Google integrating Gemini deeply into Android and Apple embedding intelligence into iOS.
When the AI operates at the OS level, it sits between the human user and the supply-side applications. It acts as a buffer layer.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does it actually bypass the restrictions of the walled garden? If an app refuses to show its API, how does the AI force it to compete?
This is where large action models become vital. An OS-level LAM doesn't need API access to interact with an app. It can interact with the graphical user interface exactly like a human does. You can read the pixels on the screen.
Oh, so if the travel app blocks third-party scrapers from seeing its prices, the AI agent simply opens the app virtually, reads the screen to see the $400 price tag, closes it, opens 3 rival apps, reads their screens, finds a $250 price, and then mimics human thumb taps to book it.
Exactly. It operates at light speed, completely unconstrained by the artificial borders the apps try to enforce. This introduces the concept of the user-side app.
A user-side app.
Yes. Currently, you don't pay out of pocket for most of your digital services. You pay with your attention and your data. You are the product. But imagine an OS-level AI agent that you pay a flat monthly subscription for.
Because I am paying the subscription, the agent's fiduciary duty is entirely to me. It is completely loyal to my economic interests.
It becomes your ruthless, hyper-intelligent advocate. You no longer open 3 different apps, navigate their manipulative interfaces, and fall victim to differential pricing.
You simply tell your agent, book a room in Chicago for these dates.
And the agent scours the entire digital landscape, forces the platforms into a silent bidding war, and secures the absolute best value. It eliminates the information asymmetry overnight.
The corporate platform can no longer dictate terms to an isolated, uninformed user because the user is no longer doing the negotiating. The platform is forced to negotiate with a civilization-level intelligence acting on the user's behalf.
When you scale that capability across an entire population, you fundamentally break digital feudalism. The power shifts from the supply side back to the demand side.
Civilization-level intelligence. That phrasing from the research is just incredible. If we extrapolate this out, once the user breaks free from the walled gardens and employs this loyal agent, what does their daily life actually look like?
The research draws a direct parallel between the Industrial Revolution bringing material equality and the AI revolution bringing service equality.
The greatest triumph of the Industrial Revolution, driven by standardized mass production, was democratizing material goods.
Exactly. Prior to the assembly line, private transportation, a horse and carriage, was exclusively a luxury for the ultra-wealthy. Henry Ford didn't invent the car. He invented the system that made the car affordable for the working class.
So material equality means the poor and the rich essentially have access to the same physical items. A billionaire's smartphone isn't vastly different from a middle-class person's smartphone. The material gap is closed.
But the defining inequality of the modern era is no longer material. It is experiential. The gap in the quality of services between the ultra-wealthy and the average citizen is staggering. The AI revolution will automate elite services the way the Industrial Revolution automated physical goods.
The healthcare example in the research illustrates this perfectly. Look at the life expectancy gap between the richest 1% and the poorest 1% in the United States. It's a full 10 years, an entire decade of human life.
And that disparity isn't just about diet or environmental factors. It is heavily driven by access to elite, dedicated medical care. An ultra-wealthy individual has a concierge medical team.
They have doctors continuously monitoring their biomarkers, tracking their genetic predispositions, and intervening at the absolute earliest microscopic signs of illness.
Right. While the average person operates on a reactive model, they wait until they're actively sick, schedule an appointment weeks in advance, and see a generalized doctor for 15 minutes.
But if everyone has a user-side AI agent with civilization-level cognitive ability,
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that agent becomes your proactive, world-class medical team. Through wearable biometric sensors, the agent can monitor your vitals 24/7.
it can cross-reference a slight change in your heart rate variability against the entirety of global peer-reviewed medical literature in milliseconds.
Exactly. It identifies a potential issue months before you feel a symptom and schedules a highly specific preventative intervention. It scales the service of a concierge doctor to billions of people simultaneously.
The agent applies that exact same logic to something as mundane as retail, which completely flips the e-commerce model on its head. Think about how terrible the current online shopping experience is for most people.
You open a massive marketplace app, you are bombarded with millions of irrelevant products, you rely on manipulated reviews, and you suffer from intense decision fatigue.
Contrast that with how a billionaire shops. They do not scroll through generic e-commerce feeds. They employ a personal stylist.
And that stylist knows their exact physical measurements, their aesthetic preferences, their existing wardrobe, and the social context of their upcoming events. The stylist curates a highly specific selection of garments and brings them directly to the client.
So the AI agent becomes the personal stylist. Instead of you visiting a generic store, the agent dynamically generates a virtual, customized, one-of-one storefront that exists exclusively for you.
The agent knows your sizing profile perfectly. It knows your budget. It knows you're attending a formal event next month.
It scours the global supply chain, bypasses the marketing noise, and presents you with 3 perfect options. The friction of searching and the anxiety of choice are completely eliminated.
Exactly.
Now, I hear this utopian vision of democratized elite services, and I instinctively look for the economic catch. If I'm a massive corporation, why would I want to provide billionaire-level services to average people? The assumption is that there isn't enough profit margin in the working class to justify it.
That assumption fundamentally misunderstands the economics of technological scaling. It's the exact fallacy that early automakers had before Ford proved them wrong.
Right. Handcrafting a bespoke luxury car for an aristocrat yields a massive profit margin per unit, but the market size is capped at a few thousand people.
If you make $1 billion off of one client, you've extracted all the wealth available in that interaction. But if you use AI to drive the marginal cost of a service down to near zero, the math inverts.
So making a $10 profit off of 1 billion people by giving them access to an automated elite medical diagnostic service is vastly more lucrative than catering exclusively to the elite.
Exactly. The wealth of the 21st century will not be built on exclusivity. It will be built on hyperscaling elite services so cheaply that the entire global population becomes your customer base.
Okay, the economic incentive is clear, but the technical hurdle to achieve this is massive. If an AI agent is going to act as my personal stylist, my doctor, and my negotiator, it has to understand me on a profoundly deep, almost intuitive level.
It can't just be a sophisticated calculator.
Yeah. Exactly. How do we train a model to understand the nuance of human preference?
This brings us to the frontier of the research, which requires a conceptual leap from physical AI to cultural AI. And it fundamentally challenges the current Silicon Valley obsession with building a single, monolithic artificial general intelligence, or AGI.
The idea that we're going to build one giant centralized brain that knows everything and does everything.
The research argues that approach is biologically and philosophically flawed. True intelligence is not a monolithic dictatorship. It is a highly specialized, distributed republic.
We see this architecture in the human brain, don't we?
We do. Different cognitive tasks are handled by entirely different specialized neural structures. Visual processing, for example, is incredibly efficient, requiring only about 6 layers of biological neurons.
And artificial intelligence has largely countered that kind of physical perception. A modern computer vision system can look at an image of a room and identify that there is a table and that the table is made of Italian marble.
That is physical AI. It understands the material properties and spatial dimensions of the physical world. But physical comprehension is entirely insufficient for an agent tasked with navigating human society.
To be a useful proxy, the AI must evolve into an artificial collective intelligence that possesses cultural psychology. Give me a concrete distinction between physical AI and cultural AI.
Well, physical AI identifies the Italian marble table and calculates how much weight it can bear. Cultural AI understands which specific human cultures revere that marble as a status symbol.
It understands the unspoken etiquette of the room.
Exactly. If a robotic servant equipped only with physical AI is asked to clear a table, it might efficiently place a hot dripping coffee mug directly on top of a priceless antique wooden root carving sitting on that marble table.
Oh, wow.
It successfully moved the mug, but it deeply offended the host.
It failed to understand context, taboo, and value hierarchies. This is why the promise of humanoid robots feels so distant. We can build motors that mimic human joints, but if the robot doesn't understand the invisible social dynamics of a household, it's a liability, not an asset.
Cultural AI requires understanding the irrational, deeply held beliefs that drive human behavior. And training a model to understand culture requires a deeply counterintuitive approach to data curation.
Right, because the prevailing narrative right now is that AI models hallucinate or act inappropriately because they are trained on the unfiltered garbage of the open internet. The industry obsession is reinforcement. Learning from human feedback RLHF, scrubbing the data, sanitizing it, and forcing the model to only see good, polite, correct information.
The research suggests that hypersanitization will result in fundamentally stunted, stupid AI. If you train a model exclusively on perfect, polite interactions, it never learns the boundaries of human behavior.
It essentially becomes a sociopath that only knows how to mimic a script. But how does exposing a model to bad data make it smarter?
Because culture is defined as much by its transgressions as its norms. If an AI only ever sees the correct way to address someone, it cannot recognize when someone is being subtly passive-aggressive or sarcastic or intentionally rude.
Right. It needs to ingest bad data, mistakes, inefficiencies, and minor social conflicts to map the negative space of human interaction. It has to learn what not to do by observing failures.
That mirrors how human civilization evolves.
Yeah.
We don't advance through a series of perfect, unbroken successes. We advance through trial, error, friction and the tolerance of small inefficiencies,
If you scrub the friction out of the training data, the AI has no resilience.
which leads directly into the evolutionary biology argument presented in the research. To understand how intelligence truly scales, we have to look at the historical debate between Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace regarding human evolution.
This was easily the most fascinating tangent in the material. Darwin and Wallace essentially co-discovered the mechanics of natural selection at the same time, but they hit a massive ideological roadblock when it came to applying that theory to the human brain.
The foundational premise of natural selection is environmental checks and balances. A species evolves a trait to solve a specific environmental pressure, but the ecosystem prevents that trait from runaway, infinite scaling.
Right. A cheetah evolves to be incredibly fast to catch gazelles. But a cheetah cannot evolve to be 10 times faster than a gazelle because doing so would require massive caloric energy, and if it ate all the gazelles immediately, the cheetah population would starve.
The environment creates a ceiling, but the human brain shattered the ceiling. Our cognitive capacity kept expanding far, far beyond what was strictly necessary to outsmart a predator or forage for berries on the savannah.
We developed abstract mathematics, poetry, and philosophy, things that have no immediate survival utility. Nothing in nature checked our intellectual expansion.
Darwin was terrified by this anomaly because it threatened his entire theory. He attempted to explain runaway human intelligence through the mechanism of sexual selection.
Sexual selection is the peacock's tail argument, right? The idea that a trait evolves not because it helps the animal survive, but because it helps the animal attract a mate.
Darwin hypothesized that early humans found intelligence and creativity attractive, so they selectively mated with the smartest individuals, creating an evolutionary feedback loop that drove the brain to massive proportions.
Much like the female peacock choosing the male with the most absurdly massive, colorful tail feathers. But the research completely dismantles that argument.
Because traits driven by sexual selection are almost universally detrimental to actual physical survival. A peacock's massive tail makes it slower, heavier, and incredibly visible to predators.
The heavy antlers of an elk require massive nutritional resources to grow and are a physical burden.
If human intelligence was merely a flashy ornament for mating, the caloric demand of our massive brains should have made us slower, weaker, and more vulnerable. We should have been an evolutionary dead end. Instead, we conquered the entire planet.
So Darwin's explanation fails. How did Alfred Russel Wallace try to solve the anomaly of the human mind?
Wallace looked at the sheer magnitude of the evolutionary leap and concluded that biology alone could not explain it. The gap between an ape and a human building a city was too vast.
But Wallace made a fatal error for a scientist.
He gave up on a physical explanation and introduced divine intervention. He argued that human consciousness must have been granted by God, a stance that permanently alienated him from the mainstream scientific community.
If it's not the peacock's tail, and it's not divine intervention, what is the actual mechanism that allowed humans to achieve runaway dominance?
Modern cultural anthropology provides the answer. Humans bypassed biological evolution through a process of cultural diffusion.
Our dominant trait isn't just raw intelligence. It is our ability to observe, copy, and scale successful behaviors across populations without needing to wait for genetic mutation.
The research breaks this down into a specific four-step engine of cultural evolution, and it maps flawlessly to the adoption of AI today.
Let's dissect those 4 steps because this is the blueprint for surviving the next decade. Step 1 is the introduction of a tech advantage.
A single individual or a small group invents a new tool. In antiquity, it was a sharper spearhead or a more efficient plow. Today, it is the deployment of a large language model. The tool itself is just latent potential.
Having a better tool doesn't automatically make you dominant, which leads to step 2, strategic use.
A tool only generates value when applied to a specific problem. You have to develop the strategy to maximize its leverage.
With AI, strategic use means moving beyond treating the model like a novelty chatbot.
It means designing the agentic workflows we discussed earlier. It means systematically integrating the AI as a cognitive prosthesis to scale your own capabilities.
The people who figure out how to strategically use the new tool transition into step 3. They become the winner group.
The winner group achieves a compounding advantage. Because they are leveraging the new technology effectively, they become vastly more productive, significantly wealthier, and strategically more powerful than the groups still relying on the old paradigm.
The gap between the winner group and everyone else widens rapidly. And the final step is where human society actually evolves. Step 4 is cultural diffusion.
Cultural diffusion is the defining characteristic of our species. When the broader population observes a winner group, we do not stubbornly stick to our old ways and die out. We emulate the winners.
We copy their tools, their strategies, and their behaviors. The research uses the fantastic example of global business attire. Why do executives in Tokyo, London, and New York all wear Western-style suits?
A wool suit is often completely impractical for the local climate. They wear them because during the 19th and 20th centuries, the groups that achieved overwhelming commercial and industrial dominance wore suits.
The suit became the cultural signifier of the winner group, so the rest of the world emulated the aesthetic.
And we saw this shift again recently. When the epicenter of global wealth generation shifted from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, the new winner group consisted of tech founders wearing hoodies, t-shirts, and sneakers.
Almost immediately, global corporate culture relaxed its dress codes to emulate the new winners.
Applying this four-step engine to our current moment is profound. The individuals and companies that figure out the strategic use of AI agents today will form the new winner group.
They will achieve a level of productivity that makes them untouchable. And within a few years, the cultural diffusion will begin.
Using AI as a cognitive partner won't be a competitive advantage. It will become a mandatory cultural baseline. If you refuse to use it, you will be as economically isolated as someone refusing to use electricity today.
Which forces us to confront the most urgent, practical question of this entire analysis. If AI agents are mastering physical perception, developing cultural nuance, and executing complex workflows flawlessly, what is left for the human being to do? What is the future of human labor?
The research does not shy away from this. It states very clearly that work, as it is currently defined by the industrial model, is going to end.
The era of selling your manual labor or your highly specialized technical skill to fulfill someone else's definition of a job is over.
The concept of being a reliable cog in a corporate machine is dead, because a software agent is an infinitely better cog. The transition requires every individual to adopt the mindset of a creator, an entrepreneur, or a director.
You are no longer selling your ability to execute a task. You are selling your ability to direct AI to solve complex problems.
The historical analogy used in the text to explain this shift is brilliant. It looks at the founding of the Han Dynasty in China to contrast two entirely different profiles of human capability.
The research contrasts brilliant tactical executors against visionary leaders. Figures like Han Xin, who was arguably the greatest military tactician of his era, or Xiao He, who was an unparalleled master of logistics and administration.
These men were the ultimate specialists. They executed complex domains flawlessly.
And our modern educational system is built exclusively to mass-produce Han Xins and Xiao Hes. We go to universities to become hyper-specialized. We train to be the most efficient accountant, the most flawless software engineer, or the most meticulous middle manager.
We train to be the best possible foot soldier. But the AI agents are rapidly becoming the ultimate generals and logisticians. They will execute the specialized tactics faster and more accurately than any human.
Therefore, the human worker must evolve to emulate a different historical figure. Liu Bang, the founding emperor of the Han Dynasty.
Liu Bang was not the strongest fighter on the battlefield. He was not a brilliant logistical mind, but he was the visionary architect.
He was the system designer. Liu Bang understood the macro objective. He knew how to arrange the organizational structure, how to assign the right brilliant generals to the right specific fronts, and how to course-correct the overall strategy when the battlefield changed.
He provided the intent. His generals provided the execution.
Stop training to be the foot soldier and start training to be the commander. The research provides a stunning real-world example of this shift in action, looking at a major American longevity research institute during the COVID-19 pandemic.
When the pandemic lockdowns went into effect, human scientists were physically barred from entering the laboratories. The traditional execution of biological research, the pipetting of fluids, the transferring of samples, the meticulous monitoring of cell cultures ground to a complete halt.
But one highly educated scientist at the institute adapted. He stayed at his home computer and wrote control scripts.
He automated the execution layer. He programmed automated robotic liquid handlers and analytical machines to continuously execute millions of biological experiments.
The human scientist did the high-level Liu Bang-style thinking, designing the hypotheses, defining the parameters of the search, and analyzing the macro results.
The machines in the empty, dark laboratory handle the repetitive, specialized execution, what the research jokingly refers to as wiping the tables.
That is the ultimate human-machine cognitive hybrid. The human provides the ambition, the creativity, and the directional intent. The machine executes the millions of mundane, specialized steps required to test that intent against reality.
And that dynamic leads the researcher to pose a critical question to his audience. In this rapidly approaching economy, are you a digital immigrant or are you a digital native?
And he emphasizes that this distinction has absolutely nothing to do with biological age. He is in his 50s, yet he operates as a digital native because he spends hours every day actively collaborating with AI, testing its boundaries, and structuring workflows.
Conversely, an 18-year-old student who uses a language model simply to cheat on a history essay without understanding the underlying mechanics or how to build a systemic advantage is operating with the mindset of a digital immigrant.
It is entirely a question of psychological posture. Are you crouching defensively, trying to protect your specialized skills from automation, or are you standing up, treating these models as your personal executive team and learning how to wield them?
Let's take a step back and look at the massive landscape we've just covered. We started with a terrifying premise that the AI bubble is going to burst in 2029.
But digging into the mechanics, we see that this crash is merely a psychological recalibration. It is the moment human expectation temporarily outruns the physical deployment of a technology that will fundamentally rewire civilization.
We trace the evolution from fixed network content generation to mobile-driven behavioral prediction.
Yeah.
We saw how the telecom industry's failure to capitalize on continuous behavioral tracking left the door open for large action models to transition AI from a passive conversationalist into an active, autonomous proxy.
We looked at Henry Ford's transition from massive, localized steam engines to distributed electrical grids and realized that AI foundation models are the new utilities, while specialized AI agents are the tireless machines on the new cognitive assembly line.
We examined the extractive nature of digital feudalism, where walled garden platforms weaponize information asymmetry against the user. And we identified how an OS-level AI, a user-side app with absolute loyalty to the individual, serves as the battering ram to smash those walls and negotiate on our behalf.
This shifts society from the material equality of the Industrial Revolution to the service equality of the AI era, where every human being has a civilization-level brain acting as their personal doctor, stylist, and advocate.
But to achieve that, we explored why AI must ingest the messy, inefficient friction of human interaction to evolve from mere physical AI into nuanced cultural AI. We mapped this against the four-step engine of cultural diffusion, recognizing that those who master the strategic use of these tools today will become the winner group that the rest of the world inevitably emulates.
And ultimately, it means the death of the human cog. We have to stop defining our value by our ability to execute mundane tasks and embrace the role of the visionary commander directing an army of intelligent agents.
It is an intensely optimistic framework for human potential, provided we are willing to discard our outdated industrial-era definitions of what constitutes meaningful work.
So, to you, navigating this transition, the takeaway here isn't to passively wait for 2029 and see what happens to your job. The mandate is to start practicing right now. Start treating these available tools not as novelties or search engines or threats to your livelihood. Treat them as your raw cognitive power grid. Start building your assembly line.
But as is our tradition, we want to leave you with one final unresolved thread to pull on. We have spent the last hour marveling at the immense value of AI predicting human behavior. We explored how cultural AI will learn our deepest habits, our unspoken preferences, and our cultural taboos to serve us flawlessly.
We celebrated the idea of humans being freed from the drudgery of execution, leaving us free to just explore, think, and create as visionary commanders. The ultimate utopian promise. We just get to be pure, creative humans.
But consider the flip side of that predictive perfection. If the ultimate utility of an AI agent is to predict human behavior so accurately that it can anticipate and fulfill our needs before we even articulate them, and if we spend our entire lives immersed in this frictionless environment, freely exploring our desires, do those seemingly spontaneous, deeply human explorations eventually just become another perfectly predictable data set for our agents?
That changes the dynamic completely.
In a future where an artificial intelligence perfectly anticipates your every impulse, removes every obstacle, and satisfies every intellectual and physical need before you even realize you have it, do we actually remain the visionary masters of our culture? Or do we slowly, comfortably, and happily become the incredibly pampered pets of our own perfect servants?
Now that is a thought that will rewire how you look at your phone tonight. Keep exploring.